community, I think, is foundational to helping to scale and create a really amazing experience early on in a customer's journey. Like if you had to think about just your onboarding experience, the minute that you get your login keys, like your username and password to a software, community could be that first thing that you connect a new customer with so that they could start to join a tribe or a community, a place where they can kind of learn more stuff. And that could be sort of a gateway to kind of pique their interest or get them to network or meet someone else, and it creates like a good environment right off the bat.
Hey, Kevin, how are you doing? It's wonderful having you here at Leadtail TV. I've been excited to interview you, and I now understand that we have met previously in the busyness of South by Southwest, so it's good to see you again.
Yeah, likewise. Great to connect with you again, Bryan.
Yeah, you too. You too. I would love to just dive right in and talk a little bit about what's happening at F5. As the business transitions from hardware to software as a service, how is that kind of thing impacting your marketing initiatives? Because that's a pretty big jump.
Yeah, and maybe it's helpful for folks that don't know who F5 is or what they do. So we basically sit within sort of the security space. We've been known for pretty much load balancers for like the past 25 years. So the company's been around for quite a bit of time. And about a year ago, we started to make this transition to go into SaaS, and like I think it's a radical shift and change. Most of my career, I've always worked for SaaS organizations, so software as a service, and so I kind of took it for granted a little bit. But if you are going through that transition, and I think digital transformation is another big buzzword that happens a lot. Really, it's like changing all the infrastructure, how you go to market. And so it's a really exciting time as we make this jump to a software-led business and organization.
Wow. So if you had to point to like maybe one or two things that you believe is the most important factor for doing what you're doing that will help it along, what would you say is kind of critical to what you need to do?
Yeah, I think the most important thing. I've always worked in, customer facing roles for a good chunk of my career. And so I just love the fact that like when you have direct connections with your customers, whether it's getting feedback from them, their thought leadership or their expertise, and being able to kind of infuse that into everything you do within a company, you have a different perspective and I think a deeper appreciation. And so I really just get excited about the fact of, we lead sort of customer engagement at F5. And so we engage with the customer in different stages of their journey in their buying cycle. And so we can start to see how we can have direct impact and influence on just how we're making a difference, how it could react to their feedback and their wants and just make the product better. So I think that's kind of the exciting thing that, where I can contribute as well as my team.
Is there a way that you like to do that where you get the most honest answer? Because sometimes people are busy or they don't have, whether it's enough time or enough insight to really give you what you need to do your job. How do you look at that and go, okay, well, how am I going to get the best answer out of them?
Yeah, it's a really good question. Part of the way and part of our team's charter is within customer engagement. It's broken up into a couple different functions, but one of them is specifically around CX, so customer experience and voice of the customer. And so there's ways that you can kind of think about how do you scale it, whether it's doing surveys or direct feedback sessions that happen within your product or your solution to get sound bites and whatnot. But there's all the other types of programs you could run, whether it's a more formal like customer advisory board where you bring together like your top customers that either spend a lot of money with you or they have some strategic importance to your organization. Then you can get more in-depth feedback, whether it's through interviews or direct conversations from a peer networking standpoint. And so those are kind of some ways that we like to tackle, how do we get that feedback in certain stages? But then we also look at sort of like the broader, like the influencers in the space, the folks that have credibility, whether it's the analysts or folks that have that thought leadership, to also see, where are the trends within security and how that's kind of affecting the business. And then couple that with, direct customer feedback to kind of get a better idea of what's going on. And also, how do we stay competitive, with our competitors in the space?
That's a lot. I can see why your job is packed, because you got a lot of different levels you got to think about, and that makes a lot of sense. What do you think the unique challenges are that come from working with marketing software? For example, it's much easier to experience churn in a software model versus hardware. What does that mean for customer marketing?
I think well, one of the things is the fact that, we all have software that we've purchased, whether it's for our own personal use or, the companies we work at. And so I think the barrier for entry is much lower. People can just literally sign an agreement, kick something off, and start using it the next day. But I think there's also a responsibility too, because it's much easier for a customer to churn and want to leave and go to something that's cheaper or provides like another, cool experience or widget. And so I think the responsibility for us is like, how do we make sure that the customer has a really exceptional experience right at the gate? So things that keep me up at night, for example, is, typically a customer has, they make a decision if they like your product or service within that first 30, 60, 90 days of their journey, right? So if they don't know clearly how to use your technology, how this is going to make their life easier, they pretty much have that decision already in their mind on should they continue, should they renew with you, or should they look for something else that's going to fit the need. And so we have to make it super easy for them to understand, like, table stakes basics, like, here's a getting started checklist even, and here's like your roadmap to be successful in starting to adopt our product. Otherwise, we might lose them immediately.
Yeah, that's true. The last thing you want to do is turn somebody away because of an experience that they had, when the greater experience is going to help them, the tool or the software. Yeah. Is there a way of making sure that you get that kind of feedback as you need it, so that you can spot that as it happens?
Yeah, I mean, I mentioned a couple of things, whether it's, leveraging surveys at a certain moment, when they're starting to engage with you. And typically, I think they would also have, direct engagements with like their account managers, or, someone that's helping with the troubleshooting or the deployment of a technology, whatever that might be. And so you start to get that anecdotal feedback here and there on how you can make refinements and suggestions to even just how to make the product super easy. One of our mottos that we have within the company is like, security is a very complex, beast. A lot of banking and government institutions rely on our technology to kind of help them, safeguard what they're doing. But we really need to make it like ridiculously easy for them to be able to kind of deploy this. And so that's sort of the rallying cry to make it a better experience for the customer at the end of the day. And that really becomes sort of like a foundation piece for how do we get that feedback in different stages and action that more clearly.
It strikes me that, along the way, what you're also doing is you're helping them to see the benefits of then, potentially shouting you from the rooftops and becoming an advocate, more than just a customer, like somebody that can stand up and say, hey, I have had such an amazing time with this. How do you approach that in terms of, the conversion from customer to advocate?
Yeah. And, I spent a good amount of time, just at my last stint working in Adobe, and, for the past almost 5.5, 6 years. And they have sort of built the playbook around how to create a raving fan base. And even before that, I came from Marketo, where we essentially kind of worked hand in hand with a lot of marketing operations professionals. And I think there's something magic that happens when you tie together, human connection and bring it together so it creates community among a larger audience. And I think, we talked a little bit about like, why it's important to have a customer be onboarded successfully, but that really is the ramp for someone wanting to become an advocate in the future, right? Like if they haven't had a good experience with you early stages, the likelihood that they would become an advocate later a year from now or 2 years down the road is probably much lower. And so I think there is that sort of direct connection between making sure that the customer is happy and satisfied and creating sort of that ramp so that they want to become an advocate and really involved with you. We actually have a focus, at F5 thinking about like, how do we create a raving fan base? And there are certain ingredients around that. Like, how do you surprise and delight them? How do you create these sort of defining moments, even within the ways that they're deploying your technology and the ways that they engage with your account teams? And how do you create that surprise and delight that wants them to come back again? So whether it's swag or other kinds of cool things or titles and recognition, ways you can kind of bring them in the fold. But those are kind of some of the things we like to think about to create sort of like that advocate base.
That's interesting. I never thought about some of those brands you just mentioned as brands that created the playbook and did a great job at them. And now that you bring it up, it makes a lot of sense. And my hat's off to the big brands that actually managed to do that, because it's such a hard thing to be a brand that can do something at scale and turn people into raving fans. That to me is like magical to the team that created that and made that happen, and yourself to just doing that's an impressive to do. And you would think that if you could do it at an Adobe, you should be able to do it almost anywhere, because I mean, that's like turning a ship around,
Right. Totally. There's, I think most people know like obviously the consumer facing brands that have really strong fan bases, whether it's the Nikes of the world or the Apples, etc. But I think from a B2B standpoint, Salesforce is one of the most iconic with, their Trailblazer community and what they've done within that software space, as well as Cisco and some other companies. But I looked at some of those brands as like examples on, how to kind of follow and create like these really great experiences for their customer.
Amazing. Awesome. So, just to kind of keep the train moving here, I also know that, one of the things that you're really passionate about it and as part of the customer journey and the experience is community. And I'd love to dig in a little bit and understand what your take is on creating a vibrant community. What does that mean to you, and how do you approach that for yourself and for the marketing initiatives that you take on?
Yeah, and we talked a little bit about community as it relates to like, creating advocates and fans. Right. I think community is this untapped resource that could be super valuable for any company, whether you're a startup or enterprise company like an Adobe. The fact that you can kind of bring customers together to learn from each other, it creates sort of this multiplying effect. And I think it's typically customers, they'll go to a community because they want to learn something, whether it's just to find information on how to do something, with your technology and just get an answer to something. But also I think there's that, behind the scenes ability for them to network, with someone else that's on the other side of a screen, right? So it may not necessarily be direct in your face, in person, but being able to connect either virtually or like on a Zoom call and have community with more than one person. I think there's sort of that magic that happens. And there's ways that you can kind of start to build that out. There's a great guy named David Spinks who kind of he wrote a book and also like sort of the playbook around like how communities are created and forged ahead. And there's some special ingredients that go into that, right? It's like that human connection. There's that wanting to learn and just kind of educate yourself. I think you can also add sort of a level of, gamification or fun with it so that you incentivize the person to want to come back, whether it's month over month or every week, to either help answer a question from someone else. And it kind of creates that credibility and sort of that, making that person feel special and rewarded. And so there's so much, and I think there's been a lot of studies that go into that. But those are kind of some of the ingredients when you think about either starting a community or maybe while you're already part of one. Early stages, I think Reddit was, one of the key players within like building sort of that community space on different topics, whether it's, just pop culture or learning something or something else. And so that's been also kind of a good way to kind of think about community in the context of how it could affect others and like the connection points that people have with each other.
So cool to be able to help other people or to see people digitally
Yeah.
and see through the screen and acknowledge them. And I think that's something that companies could do a better job of across the board. Yeah. And you're kind of, you probably already know this, but you're preach of the choir here as somebody who believes in human to human engagement and knowing that everybody just wants to be seen. And when you can build a community like that, it just goes miles to the other person to have something to show for the engagement that they're having with a company, and that they know that they are not just being seen, but they're being taken seriously for what it is that they're saying. So it goes beyond just just normal engagement. And I think that's great that you guys can really focus in on that. How do you scale? How do you scale the customer experience in a SaaS business model? That's it's not easy. It's not easy to take a look at how the customer can grow alongside you, and how do you do that appropriately in this different customer service levels while maintaining a good experience at each level?
Yeah, that is like very hard to do. And I can give some thoughts on just like, ways that we've tackled it, but I think it's sort of a dynamic and fluid thing that's still being worked out. But I think with everything now being digital, one of the key things is like you could be able to create really impactful, like scalable experiences, whether it's through email or through, we talked about community a lot. Like community, I think, is foundational to helping to scale and create a really amazing experience early on in a customer's journey. Like if you had to think about just your onboarding experience, the minute that you get your login keys, like your username and password to a software, community could be that first thing that you connect a new customer with so that they could start to join a tribe or a community, a place where they can kind of learn more stuff. And that could be sort of a gateway to kind of pique their interest or get them to network or meet someone else. And it creates like a good environment right off the bat. And then you can think about other ways that you can scale an ideal customer experience by engaging like your broader organization. I think it largely does start at the very top of the organization. Like it has to be kind of built into the DNA of your business that you care about creating that ideal experience. And you build in situations where you can get feedback, whether it's through, like I said, surveys earlier, or having direct connections with your product organization and the customer to go about the roadmap. Like, does this align with what organizations are doing or with what your own use cases are, to kind of uncover like, where there's some blind spots, where there's some things that we can make the product better. Because obviously they're paying for you, for your technology and your service. And to be able to do that in a way that it captures the right insights is important. And then also kind of feeds into, how your support teams, your account teams also interact with them. One of the ways you can kind of do that is thinking about from a technology standpoint, having sort of a customer 360, identifying sort of use cases on how you could use data and insights to better inform all your customer facing teams, so they can almost kind of predict and recommend the next engagement with your customer based on what they know about them, whether it's their usage history, their health, the support escalations they've dealt with. And so that you come into a conversation almost armed and prepared to see how you could help resolve something or make the engagement even better.
So cool. I think, when you look at across the board at everything you and I just talked about, if you were to pick one thing, I mean, you it's kind of can seem overwhelming, or daunting. Like, okay, you've got user experience, you've got the company or the community, you have the customer advocates, you have the UI and you have customer support, and it's all marketing. Everything's marketing, and so if you were to look at something and say, okay, well, what I really want to be successful at is these one, two, or three things when I first started a company, because that's what's going to move at least the needle right away. Where would you put it? Where would you put that needle in order to change, like just make some strides, some changes that really makes a big difference?
Yeah, I mean, if you like within the context of a sort of like a SaaS business or whatnot, I would say typically the most important thing is a customer's onboarding experience.
Oh wow.
Like if I had to double down on one thing and one recommendation, which sometimes doesn't get talked about enough, is how do you create a really impactful onboarding experience? Because that's typically the first exposure that a customer will have. I mentioned within that like 90-day window, if they have a great experience, the likelihood for them to want to continue with you, renew, is it goes off the charts, and equally, if you had a terrible experience, customers would likely just want to get rid of your technology just as fast. And so I think there's that critical moment where all the teams that engage that customer can come together to deliver that outcome. And so whether it's even just putting together a roadmap for them, showing them specifically what they need to do, like it's almost like that mentorship and coaching to make sure that the customer is successful right out of the gate. So that's where I would focus my time.
Brilliant. Brilliant. Mic drop right there. So if you're not doing what he just said, then I think that you're missing out, because I completely agree. When I get into a piece of software, I'm judging the experience while I'm onboarding to whether I'm going to go back tomorrow. That first time in is going to leave such a lasting impression on
Yeah.
how I move forward. Gosh, thank you. That just completely I hope everybody who watched this their day, because they should be paying attention to that. Whether you're big or small, medium, it doesn't matter. The onboarding is just everything. And if you don't think that's marketing, then well, you probably should switch careers. So okay, I'm going to ask you the hardest question of the day. Are you ready? All right. I think everybody watching here is curious, or they realize that you have a case behind you of very interesting figures and figurines, and I'm thinking that it's Star Wars and Marvel. You are a bit of a Star Wars and Marvel super fan. I'm gonna first and foremost, how'd you get into that? And number two is, what can we learn, as a fan of marketing in that area in Star Wars and Marvel, that teaches marketers about creating a loyal fan base, like you've become.
Yeah, I mean, totally. I mean, yeah, I'm definitely like on the extreme side of it, but I would say like first off, I'm a child of the '80s, and so a lot of this stuff, whether it was reading comic books, going to my local comic book shop and getting like the latest issue of a Marvel, Captain America, series, like it brought like sort of that joy. Watching the Star Wars movies and even just kind of where it's evolved over the past 40 years, like this is like the best time to be a fan. And so, I collect the memorabilia, the toys, the action figures, and I grew up with this pretty much my entire career or my life. And so it brings me a lot of, joy and satisfaction, but they're also, I think, have created sort of that playbook around building a fan base. I also go to like things like Comic-Con conventions and like nerd out at looking at all the latest stuff. And so for me, it gives me a reminder of like, why are we really doing these things in marketing? It's because we want to spark joy and excitement. We want to create community for people to like nerd out about this fandom and just really ultimately have a good time. And I think that sometimes that gets lost in the shuffle because we're selling a product that is technical or complicated, and it's for a certain audience that is very nerdy in their own way. But I think if we go back to the point of like, why are we trying to do this? Why are we selling it to begin with? It's to make someone's job easier, but also to kind of bring people together to learn, to network and create community or create an advocate for a certain solution or product that you're selling. So that's how I kind of relate to, the connection point there.
Bam. What a great way to end that. In a galaxy near you, not far, far away, you can learn how to create a fandom experience, right in your own backyard, with everything that you see, just even in movies and Disney and all these different ways that you've seen. We can take note with some of that. I'd love to do a whole nother interview on the sequence and series of Star Wars and really geek out, but I won't do that to you on which one's your favorite and why. But we're going to have to save that for another time. Kevin, thank you. Thank you so much for being on Leadtail TV. I really appreciate all your thoughtful responses and especially some of the actions that you challenged everybody on. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks again, Bryan. Appreciate the time.